When you hear the word tithing, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's giving 10% of our income to a church, right? But what if I told you that entire idea might be a complete misunderstanding? The source material we're digging into today makes a fascinating case that the original concept of tithing wasn't about funding religion at all. It was about something way bigger. So let's just ask the big question right up front. What if the original purpose of the tithe had absolutely nothing to do with putting money in a collection plate and everything to do with building and sustaining a free society? That's the core idea we're exploring, and believe me, the answer the source gives is pretty radical. So here's the roadmap for today. We're going to start with how this idea of tithing got so misunderstood in the first place. Then we'll look at the two very different paths a society can take. After that, we'll uncover what the source says the tithe really was, a form of government. We'll trace how that system shifted from freedom to force, look at the dilemma that leaves us in today, and finally, explore how we might get back to the original way. All right, let's jump right in. The first major point from our source is this. The whole concept of giving 10% to a church is a pretty modern invention. It's actually a huge departure from what tithing originally meant in ancient practice. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. Tithing wasn't about funding an institution or a building. It was about funding a community. It was a completely voluntary system of mutual support. It was the social glue that held a free, self-reliant society together, neighbor helping neighbor. This whole idea brings us to a really fundamental conflict. According to the source, there are really only two ways you can organize a society, and they are polar opposites. It's a choice between free will and force. And you can see the two paths laid out here. On one side, you have a society built on charity, liberty, and free will offerings, where leaders are true public servants. And on the other side, well, you've got a system based on tribute, authority, and forced contributions. Taxes, where rulers exercise lordship over the people. This quote really gets to the heart of that distinction. It draws this super sharp line in the sand. You've got rulers who call themselves benefactors, people who do good for you, but they do it by exercising authority. And then there's a command to be completely different, to build a society based on service, not on lordship. That difference is everything here. Okay, so brace yourself, because this is where the source makes its most startling claim. The original tithe, it wasn't a religious donation. It was actually a system of government, a completely decentralized bottom-up network that was run by the people for the people. And get this, the word itself has been totally misunderstood. A tithing with a Y wasn't a percentage. It was a thing, a noun. It was a self-governing group of 10 families. They made a peace pledge to each other to be responsible for one another's welfare. It was a social safety net, not a financial rule. And you can see how this thing scaled up. It was so simple and organic. It all started with a family, the basic building block. 10 families would voluntarily form a tithing and choose a minister or a public servant to help them. 10 of those tithings would form 100. The network could grow, but the power always stayed at the local grassroots level. And here's the genius part, the built-in accountability. These public servants, called Levites, they weren't handed a guaranteed salary. They were supported entirely by these voluntary free will offerings, and their pay was tied directly to how well they served the community. If they did a bad job, well, people could just stop contributing. The power to hire and fire, essentially, always remained with the people. So you have to wonder, if this system was so effective and kept power with the people, what on earth happened? The source describes this slow, gradual shift throughout history, a drift away from this voluntary model and toward a coercive system of top-down state control. And the source points to this quote from Plutarch, which is just, wow. It suggests that liberty isn't usually taken by a tyrant's sword. It's willingly surrendered, piece by piece, in exchange for benefits from a central authority. When a government starts handing out goodies, it slowly chips away at people's independence. I mean, it's a classic story. We've seen it over and over in history. Societies like ancient Rome started to depend on a central government for their welfare and their security. People got the famous free bread and circuses. And in exchange, they gave up a little bit of their freedom, a little bit of their responsibility to their neighbors. This system even has a name in the source material, Korban. It's described as basically any state-run welfare program funded by mandatory taxes. And the critique here is that this kind of system makes true charity impossible.
It replaces your duty to your neighbor with an obligation to the state, effectively making the government your provider, your benefactor. Now, this isn't just some ancient history lesson. The whole point the source makes is that these old patterns are playing out right now, all around us. We are living with the consequences, the echoes of Korban, today. When you put the two models side by side, the contrast is just staggering. The ancient model was all about free will offerings going to accountable servants, and the result was liberty and strong social bonds. The modern state model, as the source describes it, is based on compelled tribute, taxes, going to state benefactors, and the result is obligation and dependency. It's the difference between a free community and what the source calls the world's Korban. And the language the source uses here is incredibly strong. It argues that when we become dependent on the state for our welfare, we stop being free citizens and instead become human resources or even merchandise to be managed. It describes this as a modern-day return to the bondage of Egypt, a system where you serve a central power in exchange for your daily bread. Okay, so after that really stark diagnosis of the problem, you might be asking, well, what's the solution? The good news is the source doesn't just leave us there. It offers a powerful call to action to rediscover and start rebuilding this ancient model of a truly free society. The solution proposed isn't political, not in the traditional sense. It's all about community. It's a call for people to start forming their own small networks, like those original tithings, to voluntarily support one another through real charity and mutual aid. The idea is to build a parallel system, one based on service instead of force, right from the ground up. And that brings us to the final, really challenging question that the source leaves us with. It's the core of the whole thing, really. In the world we live in today, how do we begin to shift our reliance away from these massive systems of compelled tribute and back toward a culture of voluntary, free will offerings and genuine community support? If this explainer got you thinking and you found it valuable, please help get these ideas out there by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. We would seriously love to hear your take on all of this in the comments below. The source material is all about building new voluntary networks, and if that's something you're interested in, you can learn more by checking out the Living Network at preparingyou.com. Of course, the link for that is in the description. Thanks so much for watching.